Hi, welcome to Village Church Connections. I'm Andy Hawkins, the senior pastor of the Village Church, and I'm here with Steve Irvin. Steve is, along with his wife Claudia, is an international worker with the Christian and Missionary Alliance. And Steve, you've had a varied career in terms of the locations where you have ministered, and so across a couple of different continents. So tell us, first of all, where you've been ministering.
Well, after serving here in Florida as a pastor, we were assigned to Latin America, to Colombia. And we were in Colombia for 20 years, then redeployed to Argentina. From Argentina to Toronto, Canada, and now we've been in Spain the last 4 years.
Ah, Spain. So that's the current location for your ministry, and so the language, apart from Canada, of course, the language has tied all those things together, right? So basically, you learn Spanish. But Spanish in Colombia, is it similar or different than Argentina, Spain?
I make the comparison between English here in the U.S. and English in Great Britain.
I see.
So different accents, different pronunciation of some letters, and the idiomatic expressions can change completely. So something we use very commonly, for example, in Colombia, people in Spain wouldn't have any idea what that means, and vice versa.
I see. How long were you in Colombia then?
20 years.
20 years in Colombia. And what kinds of ministry did you do there?
A little bit of everything.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, we worked with young people and missions mobilization, evangelism, church planting. We were in 3 church planting projects. Along the way, I was an itinerant evangelist internationally for 10 years. I taught in the Bible Institute and then in the graduate level, pastored a church.
Yeah, that's about everything.
I'm telling you, I got into everything.
Yeah, your international workers really are called upon to do all kinds of things, aren't they?
Well, you know, there's a beatitude that says, "Blessed are the flexible, because they will not be bent out of shape."
That's right. There you go. Yeah. And so you were in Colombia for 20 years, but what had you move to Argentina? What were the kinds of things that spurred that transition?
Yeah, it wasn't a personal decision, really. We got to the end of 20 years. The mission had been there at that time some 60 years, 65 years, and the church had grown to such an extent that the mission decided to redeploy personnel to other areas.
And that says something about sort of the philosophy of ministry that we have in the Christian and Missionary Alliance with respect to our international work, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's a focus on, well, first of all, developing the church through making disciples, raising up leaders, and then once the church is self-sustainable, it's time to look for another job.
So we're actually trying to work yourself out of a job by creating a really viable and sustainable national church, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So then, of course, you go to Argentina and do similar kinds of things?
Yes, although in Argentina, when we went, we thought we'd be there the rest of our career. And we ended up being there only 2 years and a half. And yes, doing similar things. There was a church planting project, teaching. Actually got into, we headed a small foundation that partnered with local churches in reaching out to people in poverty. Those were just a lot of things going on. It was good. And then was from there that we got the call to go pastor church in Toronto.
I see. Yeah, that must have been quite a transition.
I tell you, you go from the South Pole to the North Pole.
How about that?
Yeah.
How long were you in Toronto?
Just 3 years.
3 years, yeah. But now you're in Spain.
Exactly.
And so what kinds of things are you doing in Spain?
My primary assignment is to Bible Institute teaching. So that takes me to, well, we live in Madrid and then teach also in Barcelona. And last year we actually opened up modules in the Canary Islands. That's the primary ministry, mentoring pastors, but also preaching wherever the door opens.
I see.
Sharing in other countries as well.
Absolutely. And I'm assuming that there are differences in the sort of responsiveness of peoples that you've seen in Colombia and in Argentina and in Spain. Tell us a little bit about how the ministry is different in those places.
Well, the biggest difference is that in Latin America, the last 30 years has experienced harvest. People responsive to the gospel. Colombia, for example, lived many years of violence and insecurity, and God used this to open people's hearts to the gospel. So we went from a time of harvest in Latin America to a time of plowing in Western Europe.
Isn't that something? Yeah.
Spiritual receptivity in Western Europe is nothing compared to in Latin America and in Africa and in many places in Asia.
I see. Yeah. So the kinds of things that you do, obviously, in Spain would be different than the kinds of things that you did in Colombia.
Yes, to a certain degree, although fundamentally the gospel's the same, so we're sharing Christ as we can. But what happens in Spain is that the majority of those who come to Christ are not Spaniards.
Oh, interesting.
They're immigrants.
So you're working with different kinds of people in Spain then?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we work with Latin American immigrants above all because the majority of the Alliance National Church is Latin America. Even the president of the Spain National Church is a Peruvian.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. So most of the students in the Bible Institute are Latin Americans. The church where we focused our ministry for 4 years is made up of Colombians and Ecuadorians.
Isn't that amazing?
But at the same time, reaching out to our neighbors who are Spaniards, seeking to share Christ with them. But on the one hand, great openness among many Latin Americans. On the other hand, people just not ready yet as we share with Spaniards.
Right. Well, it sounds like an exciting ministry, having plenty of challenges with the different types of people with whom you work. But I trust that you're finding the ministry fulfilling, and that you're going to get during this home assignment that you're on, hopefully get your batteries recharged and be able to go back and enjoy that ministry and find fruitfulness in it.
Yeah, we look forward to going back in a year, but for now we're going to enjoy grandchildren even as we're visiting churches like here in Shell Point.
Fantastic. Well, we're glad you're with us, Steve, and we look forward to hearing more about your ministry as you return to the field. But God bless you, and God bless each and every one of you, and we hope to see you soon at the Village Church.